So welcome to Once Upon a Pandemic with myself, Yvonne Redden, and this series is about sharing stories on staying positive through these challenging times. And I'll be chatting to people from around the globe. And at the end of this video, I'm also going to give out a writing prompt for anyone looking to begin writing, and I'll explain that a little bit more at the end. And today we are in Tipperary, and we're talking to the miracle man, Liam Ryan, and we will share in a minute how he is known as just that. Firstly, thank you for joining me, Liam.
Thank you, Yvonne. Delighted to be here. Welcome to Tipperary.
Yeah, thank you. And how's the weather there, first and foremost?
Actually, it's just brewing up a bit of a storm as I look out the window here beside me. So, typical Irish day.
You can have all the seasons in one day. It's very similar here in Dublin as well.
Exactly.
So, Liam, I know this lockdown has been a nightmare, and this is what prompted me to start this series. Yes. It's just so tough, isn't it? How are you staying positive in the lockdown? Like, what do you do every day?
Well, you told me you were going to ask me that question, Yvonne, and I've been thinking about it for the last few days, and really, I have a very simple, old-fashioned, almost kind of unheralded answer these days. I have great faith, and I believe in God, and I have a couple of little techniques I do. I light a candle every morning for everybody I know and for the day ahead. And really very little will faze me after that. And I think having faith is a very undervalued source of stoicism and strength in today's world. It's kind of not discussed as much anymore, but it's a great thing to have, because literally, if you believe we're all going to a better place than this, there is nothing in this world that can touch you.
No,
and it really stood to me 20 years ago as well.
And let's share what happened to you 20 years ago. Well, it's about 19 years ago now, is it, Liam?
2002. Great story, Yvonne.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to say it has found its way to most parts of the world at this stage, because it's one of the best there is. I was admitted to the University Hospital in Limerick with what we all thought was a sinus infection for a routine procedure called a sinus wash. And my great ENT consultant in there, John Fenton, we got on like a house on fire. And when he brought me down to do the sinus wash, he came back to the ward the next day and he told me, completely out of the blue, he found one of the most advanced head and neck cancer tumors he had ever seen in his life, lodged in the middle of my head. And he told me there and then, he said, Liam Ryan, you are the second worst case I've ever seen. And I have to tell you now, the worst case was dead in a month. And he said, that's all I have down for you too.
I mean, that's something to say to you, isn't it? Like, how can you digest something like that? Jesus.
Well, we got on very well, and he knew me by then. He knew I wanted to be told honestly where I was. So he felt he could tell it to me. But really, that particular day, on day one, most cancer patients will tell you, you have absolutely nothing. The whole world is just pulled from under you. And no matter what version of it you have, you just can't see past the fact that you're going to die.
When you hear that word, it's a horror. People don't like to hear that word. Sure they don't.
Especially like men know nothing about health. So I didn't even know there were different stages at that point.
Yeah.
So you have a bit of a learning curve to get onto straight away. But I'll quickly whip through.
Yeah, please.
I have a couple of great lines, but one of them is, in the blackest of holes, there's still the most amazing chinks of light. And the very first of those was standing in front of me. We got on so well, I was able to ask him the ultimate question you can ever ask any consultant. And that is, what would you do if this was you?
Yeah.
So he said to me, your condition is very rare. Head and neck cancer is quite rare. It's getting a little bit more common now. And he said, there's only a handful of surgeons in the world could even look at a case like yours. But he went on to say he had spent 3 years in Liverpool in England in what he regarded as a center of excellence for head and neck cancer. And he said, if I was you, I'd go to Liverpool, because at least there you're in the hands of people familiar with this condition. But he conditioned it by saying, I don't think they're going to say to you anything different than what I've just said, as in, you're inoperable and you have a month to live. But at least there you're with the experts.
Yeah.
And the chink of light was, because he knew them, he was able to lift the phone and get me a referral within a week. because obviously the clock was ticking now, and I hadn't time to find Liverpool on the internet a month later or whatever. So again, I'll just complete this little segment.
Yeah.
A week later, myself and my wife Pam went over to Liverpool. We met two great men. Simon Rogers is the chief maxillofacial surgeon in Aintree University Hospital, and Dave Husband is the head radiotherapist in Clatterbridge Hospital. And what's lovely about living on is they tell you little bits years later that they wouldn't or couldn't tell you at the time. But those two men, both of those two men in that session also decided this guy isn't going to make it. The surgery he needs is just vast.
Too intense, yeah.
But myself and Pam, the great thing was that they're assessing more than just your condition. They're also assessing you and could you cope. I mean, a really good outcome for me was if I did survive to some limited quality of life for 2 or 3 years afterwards,
yeah.
Blind, deaf, dumb, and also because the tumor was right up against my spine and brain, the likelihood of physical and mental impairment were very high. And that would have been a miracle in itself if I survived. So we ticked all the other boxes for them, and they just between them felt we've got to give them a shot.
Yeah.
And this wonderful story starts there. I now see that surgeon every year socially, and we're incredible friends. I'm great for him too, because I'm the walking, talking, speaking to Yvonne Redding example of the great work he can do.
And did your faith begin then, Liam, or have you always had faith?
I want to tell you two stories on that. I speak to corporates now and again, Yvonne, and I like to talk about faith without using the word God at times, because I know the kind of audience I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And before my surgery, it was a 12-hour operation, as big as surgery comes. Everything was at huge risk. And I knew the elephant in the room was that I was going to die. And it was a very small room. So I knew my fight had to be 100%. I couldn't have an Achilles heel that there was a little bit of what I was afraid of. So I had to deal with the fact that I was likely to die. So a lot of my friends that time didn't believe in God or didn't have faith. So I decided to just look at things in a very practical way. So I looked at this world we live in now. I remember this distinctly. It was about 2 nights before the surgery. And I just saw the wonderful earth we live on with all its wondrous creations of oceans and volcanoes and stars and moons. And then I looked at us and how we're all flawed. We all make mistakes every day. Most of us can barely make a decent cup of coffee. And I just came to a very simple, rational conclusion for myself. And that was, we can't have made all this. There has to be something greater.
Yeah.
And what followed on from there was the natural instinct in all of us is a sense of goodness. We all want to love, to be happy. We don't want violence and corruption, So the whatever the greater thing is, it has to be a source of goodness. And I just firmly believe a day will come when everything will make sense and we'll all reach a place where there will be no injustice, no violence, no poverty. And that is still to come. Because to me, obviously, this earth is not our home because there are too many things wrong.
Yeah.
So I use that as my basis, right? And my recovery and everything was extremely difficult. But if you're not afraid to die, Yvonne, there's nothing left to be afraid of. So I was unbreakable from that point on.
Yeah.
I was immensely strong. My pain threshold went through the ceiling. And I just like to use that as my little description of how my faith stood to me when I needed it most.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think like what you're saying there about noticing things around you and whatever, that's happened in the last 11 months again. Probably, with the pandemic, people have started to see
the sun rises every morning. And we take it for granted.
Always there, exactly.
We complain, my cappuccino is too cold. That kind of nonsense. But anyway.
And we know it's nonsense now. Do you know what I mean? I think people.
I'll just give you another
good. Yeah, give me another
little example that reinforced that for me was about 3 years ago. I was in Auschwitz. I went over to a wedding in Poland, and we went to Auschwitz. And at the time, I remember, I checked myself. I said, if I was there at the time, what would I have done to stay strong? And that's the ultimate test, if you like. And I realized no kind of wellness course or positivity guide was going to be any good to me then. The only thing left standing, if I was a prisoner in that camp, was a belief that one day the last will be first and the first will be last, and we will all reach a better place than where we are now. That was all that could remain as any source of strength for me, because everything else was obviously gone. The world had abandoned me to that place. And I felt that was the ultimate test of how strong, what faith can give you when the rest of the world has abandoned you. So I just also use that as just a little, that was my second check as to what faith can do. It's just great to have it if you have it.
Absolutely. Sure, you're a living testament to what good faith
Well,
and the will to live. Yeah. And
but it was a jigsaw, a great medical team and brilliant family and community.
The support
and
and
if any
community
piece was missing, I wouldn't be here. But it's just a great story.
And you got you did marathons, I think, afterwards too, did you, Liam?
Well,
you got back to that level that you could do them again, do this.
I did one since, and the medics liked the story from that point of view, because I was the classic case, Yvonne, of somebody who shouldn't get cancer. I'd never smoked, I'd never carried weight, I'd run 6 marathons, 3 of them at least in reasonable times. And, a lot of people spend time trying to backtrack and why did I get it?
And where did it come from? I smoked too much, I drank too much, all them things. But maybe it's just something that's there,
It's just a predatory disease. You and I can do exactly the same things and you'll get it and I won't, or vice versa. There is no explanation. And you just draw a line, you have it now, and none of that matters now, and there's only one way to go from there. And I mean, I'm convinced we all have a secret store of resolve within us. You don't know what's there until you go looking. And I guess I was just pleased with what I found. The fight became everything. As I said, I dealt with Diane. If I was to go, I wanted to go down in the ring with my gloves on. And I literally wanted to be able to clench my fist on my deathbed and said, Liam Ryan, this has been through no fault on your part. And without that single-minded strength and conviction, I wouldn't have come. That was my bit in the jigsaw. So that's what I found in myself, and that's what I did.
And is there a level of pain and still there, Liam?
No, I've been a lot of people have lesser forms of cancer than me, if you like, but have side effects for the rest of their lives. How my story has become so big is the way I've completely returned to the world. My second life caught up with my first again. As I speak to you now, I can only open my mouth half an inch. But as you can hear, I can speak perfectly.
Very clearly,
That's the greatest miracle of all. I have to shuffle food in a little bit at times. And I have a mild discomfort with the eye now and again. But absolutely,
it's unbelievable.
I left it all behind 19 years ago. It's incredible.
And it is incredible.
That's the bit the medics, if I lived to a life of disability for 3 or 4 years, it still would have been a great, I shouldn't have got out of 2002. So it's the fact that I've come back as good as I have has just made the story so big.
But I'd say you're in the textbooks over in Liverpool, Liam, the medical textbooks.
It's great. And it's great for, I asked Simon Rogers at the time what chance I had, because I wanted to know. And again, in that discussion, he knew he couldn't tell me I had no chance, or they didn't think I was going to make it, because it just would have drained me. And he very cleverly invented a figure of 5%. And it was brilliant, because it's so low, it's a very slim chance. But it's not zero. So, so it gave me something. I got a great call from a friend of mine who said, Liam, 5% is brilliant. If I had to pick 1 out of 100 every time, I'd always pick you. Almost telling me I had 5 times more chance than I needed. And that's the kind of people you need to come to you. But even if you take the 5% figure as it is, that means 1 in 20 make it. Well, what I think I give back to Simon Rogers now is every new patient he comes in, he says, my God, I hope you're going to be the next Liam Ryan. And I can see it in them when I go over. They just love me walking in the door.
It's fantastic.
The ripples from this story are just incredible. I get lovely emails most days from all over the world. And it's great for me to still be here to see what it has gone on to do.
It's brilliant, Liam. And I have your book here. Now, I know there's a story behind it. I know it's backwards or the other way around. There's a story behind this title, isn't there?
I have one too.
I see yours is fine. How come mine's the opposite? But anyway, so there it is there. Look, Cancer 4, Me 5. When did you publish this?
I published it by 2002. by 2012, there was no doubt the recovery was complete. I was back working, I was back running. And I'd say most cancer patients, they want to bookend the end of the survival bit of their life and the getting on with the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So that was 10 years on, and I thought the 10th anniversary is a nice chance to do that. And I was hard on myself. I wanted to do two things to prove it to myself. I wanted to run my first marathon post-cancer to prove physically the body was back to where it was before. And by then I was getting emails from all over the world of people telling me how cancer patients, especially, how much the story was encouraging them. So I said, and still in all our technology, the best way to preserve a story is the old-fashioned way of writing a book. So I said, I'm going to sit down and try and write a book, and then the story is left behind me for all time. It can travel without me. It's preserved.
Yeah.
And I'd say for most people when they write, I knew nothing about writing, but when you write a book, the title is obviously a big decision.
But it comes to you when you're writing it, I think. I always say that in my classes. Don't worry about the title.
I guess it does.
It does, yeah.
So I wanted something unique. I wanted the word cancer in the title, because I think, as I said to you when we were in communication, I wanted somebody to pick up this book in a secondhand bookstore in Canada and know from the title, this is the book I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You know, it was never going to be called The Hills Are Green in Tipperary or something obscure.
Yeah.
And the 4 is a stage 4 tumor. And one consultant in Liverpool told me mine could have been classed as stage 44. It was that bad. So that has significance. And the 5 is the 5 years of remission you need to serve out without any reoccurrence before you can say you've actually beaten that cancer. So it's as if cancer went 4-0 up in the first 5 minutes of the game, and it took me 5 years to get the 5 goals to win 5-4.
It's brilliant.
And I like the idea, if you see a 5-4 scoreline in a game, it also gives you an indication of the game itself.
Yeah.
A ding-dong affair that could have gone either way in the end.
Yeah.
And the extra time is, through my treatment, I got 2 separate bouts of meningitis and a deep vein thrombosis, all 3 of which ironically nearly killed me by themselves, even though I got one of the worst forms of cancer going.
Yeah.
So I just felt that, in a nutshell, painted so much about what's on the inside.
Yeah.
So,
and it's written lovely. It's written in your voice. It's lovely to read. I've read a little bit. So,
a lot of people have said that to me, which is lovely to hear. Thank you.
It is, because you want to read it like as if you're speaking, and I think it is written like that. So well done, Liam.
Thank you.
And I was a question I ask all my guests is if they were to write their memoir in 3 to 4 words, but what would it be? So you've done that. Huh? You did.
I beat you to it.
You're very good. And look, it's an incredible story and a book well worth reading. Oh my God.
And if the website is.
Yeah, where can people find you? Yeah, I was going to ask you that. And where can people contact you?
Very simple to remember, Liam 5cancer4.com. So the book is Cancer 4 Me 5, but the website is Liam 5cancer4.com. And the book is all paid for now. I just love to see it go out, especially to cancer patients. If you can make contact with me through the website, and I'm happy to sign it and send it to anybody who feels it could do good, and it always does good.
And you're on LinkedIn as well, Liam.
I have a huge, quite a big following on LinkedIn.
We connected on LinkedIn. I'm delighted we did.
Yeah, the story goes out a lot on LinkedIn, so that's great. Yeah.
So that's great, and I'll put your LinkedIn profile. So Liam, thanks very much. I'm just, for people watching this, I'm a writer, so I'm going to start giving writing prompts. And my writing prompt from listening to your challenges in life, I want to ask people, why don't they write down a time in their life that was challenging and start writing a paragraph on it and just see how it flows. So that's my writing prompt in connection with what we're talking about today. And if it gets to 2 paragraphs, even better, and just go with it. So that's all I'm going to say to anyone watching today who wants a writing prompt.
I'll just add to that.
Yeah.
Yvonne, I speak to a lot of cancer patients now, and I say to them all, write down what you've been through, even if just for yourself, just your own record of your disease. And then, and a lot of them would be non-writers, and they come back to me and say, Liam, I'm delighted you asked me to do that.
Yeah.
I did it as part of my recuperation, then not knowing it would ever turn into a book. And then I say to them, if one person reads that and gets something out of it, You've turned something hugely negative into something completely positive for one person.
Yeah.
So there's a writing quality in all of us.
In everyone.
We all
yeah.
have interesting stories. And even if one of your family, if your grandchildren or great grandchildren read it in 50 years' time, it's worth doing.
Yeah, I think so. And it doesn't have to be chronological, you know, it can be just whatever, and then you put it all together later. That's what people always say. How can I start a story? You just begin by writing down what even a gratitude journal is brilliant for starting. So
you're preserving history.
Yeah, absolutely. Liam, thank you very much for your time and being part of this series. And look, positivity is just, you're the most positive.
The only way I would not be here today without adopting the stance I did.
Unbelievable.
And if I did it, anybody can do it. I'm the most ordinary man you could meet.
And it's 19 years later. You're a testament to yourself. It's amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, and stay safe, Liam.
Thanks, lovely to talk to you.
And you. And if anyone wants to contact me, they can on yvonneredden.com or across the social media platforms. So see you all next time, Once Upon a Pandemic. And thank you very much. And bye for now. Thank you so much, Liam.